Professional conduct is what you expect from your coach. It is the manner in how they act. Coaches are expected to provide standards of professional conduct, which include good ethics, appropriate displays of behaviour, and should promote honesty and fair play. All of these attitudes should be condoned in every sport, because these are the right attitudes to have to ensure that everyone is treated the same and gets respect. But for example, in a sport like athletics, when your coach is your only influence, then they should teach you the correct professional conduct within your sport and should encourage you to have respect for other athletes and coaches. However, in contrast, not all coaches show professional conduct. They could show negative behaviour, but showing professional conduct doesn't just apply to a match situation. Coaches have a responsibility to set an example to the athletes in a training session as well. So poor professional conduct includes not being punctual to training sessions or matches, being unprepared, whether that is in planning preparation for a training session or having the wrong equipment. In connection with this, if a coach is being paid, then there is a higher expectation on them to show professional conduct, because they are not just giving up their free time, they are getting paid to coach certain athletes, so they have a certain job to do. Coaches must respect the fundamental rights, dignity and worth of all those taking part in the sport. For example, if a male coach is coaching a women's football team, then he must not discriminate or judge any athlete just because they are a different gender. This obviously applies the other way as well. So if a female coach was coaching a male's football team, in addition, the coach must treat everyone equally, no matter their age, gender, disability and other factors. Equal opportunities are there so that everyone has the same chances in life, no matter their ethnicity, race, religion, gender, sexuality, disability, socio-economic status, or body shape. There is a positive to equal opportunities, as this way we get to see every and any athlete perform, as certain sports are adapted to cater for athletes' needs. For example, the Paralympics. This way it is inclusive, as the athletes in the Paralympics should still get the same opportunity to show off their talent as the athletes in the Summer Olympics would. Similarly, it is the coach's responsibility to include everyone and not have favourites. This is because no person, as a whole, is better than any other person. However, a negative is that not everyone follows the acts of equal opportunities, because there are stereotypes and assumptions in sports, as some coaches and people believe that some sports are best suited to different genders. A prime example of this is within a sport like football or rugby, where males are the dominant gender that play the sport. The assumption is that because those sports are contact sports, then women and girls are too weak to play in them. However, this is not the case, as female athletes are capable of doing any sports that men can do. In contrast, men might argue that netball is a highly female-dominated sport and is not considered a sport for men to play at all, as there is not a male's professional netball league. Relating to all of this, for the sports where there is a clear dominant gender that play the sport, like football, there is a clear difference of the money and facilities that are put into the sport, and this is regarding the genders of the athletes. If we take the males football players playing in the Premier League, for example, they get paid an average of £50,000 a week, whereas female football players playing in the Premier League get paid £35,000 a year, which is a massive difference for athletes that are both at the professional level. So if coaches and the organisations of these clubs and teams don't try and stop differences between genders within the same sport, then there is just going to be a perpetuate of the same experiences. These are procedures you take in order to keep everyone around you safe. One way that coaches can make sure that everyone around them is safe is if that they pre-plan a training session and map out where each bit of equipment and participant is going to be. This way, they are aware of their surroundings, and then they can address any hazards before the athletes take part in the activity. This is especially important if children or elderly people are taking part, as they are fragile and a coach has a duty of care to protect them. In connection to this, a coach must know how to use the equipment properly and have knowledge of the skill they are trying to teach, so that the athlete can execute the skill safely and properly. For example, in a sport like gymnastics, where there are a lot of hazards, an athlete could potentially injure themselves. This could be during a skill or even if people's behaviour gets out of hand and silly. So it is therefore the coach's job to manage the participants' behaviour and control the situation. In a sport like skiing or snowboarding, the coach needs to have good communication and give clear instructions to the athletes, but also to the members of staff that are around them, just in case they have to react to dangerous situations. In addition to this, the coach also needs to know how to use medical equipment for those athletes that might have a disability. However, consequently, if a coach has poor communication, it could put athletes in danger. All coaches need to have an element of qualifications in first aid so that they can support and care for their athletes if they get injured. The health and safety tests need to be up to date. For instance, the fire alarm needs to be checked regularly so that if the fire alarm sounds, then the coach can escort the participants out of the building safely. Coaches have to take risk assessments in any sport, whether that be in cricket or badminton. They have to think of all the possible hazards and then put a plan and action into place so that they can control the problem if and when it happens. Also, they have to risk rate certain hazards to see how likely they are to happen so that they can put in methods and measures to stop the situations from happening. After a training session, a coach has to evaluate their risk assessments to see if they can improve them so that the activities that people will take part in are safer. Legal obligations are acts and laws that coaches must obligate to. An advantage of having legal obligations is that they are put into place to protect people so that they are safe. The laws protect the coach and the participant. In sports, accidents happen, so that's why legislations change. For example, if a coach is teaching a group of children how to row, then that instructor has a duty of care to the children to protect them as they are loco parentis at that specific moment. There are other factors that they have to take into account: the participant's age, disability, and the group size, especially in an activity like rowing, as it involves water. So that is another aspect the instructor has to think about, as some water conditions can be dangerous. So by law, the coaches have to have a certain qualification to teach a specific skill. Also, they have to have qualifications to use certain equipment as well. For example, in a sport like rugby, a rugby tackle can potentially be dangerous for the participant doing the skill, but also the person receiving the tackle. So the coach has to have a certain qualification to teach that skill in certain stages so no one gets hurt. There has to be an appropriate supervision ratio of instructors to children, because rowing requires the children to follow instructions carefully for their own safety. So that's why it is safer and easier to talk to a small group of children rather than a large group. However, in contrast, in a sport like football, if a coach is coaching children, then there are less hazards than rowing, as there is no dangerous water conditions. Although the coach still has a duty of care to the children for their safety, but can be more relaxed when it comes to the ratio of instructors to children, as the children are less likely to injure themselves when completing a football skill. Similarly, as much as the coaches have a responsibility for the athlete's physical health, they also have a responsibility for the athlete's emotional health. Each organisation has to have a safeguarding policy. This is to keep children safe and report symptoms of abuse. If a child confides in you, then you can't disclose the information that they give you. You have to tell your nominated welfare officer. In regards to safeguarding policy, the teachers and coaching staff have to be up to date with their training, because this means they are more prepared when dealing with certain situations. Also, coaches have to be DBS checked before they can coach people. However, this only applies to big organisations like adventure parks. This doesn't apply to a local league netball club where someone's parent is the coach. The coaches have responsibility to educate their athletes about drug use and general specific nutritional advice, but the coach has to be aware of who he or she is giving advice to, as they wouldn't tell children under 10 about drug use, as the subject is too mature for them to understand. However, they would offer this advice to teenagers, as it is a major problem in our society. A disadvantage is that a coach must not offer their advice beyond their qualifications. This applies to any sport, whether that be an individual sport like horse riding or a team sport like basketball. Coaches have to have insurance like public liability so that people are safe. This links to any and every sport. The coaches also have to ensure that the vehicles are properly licensed and insured when taking a team of any age, gender, or disability to a training session or match. They also have to carry out risk assessments for travelling so that they are aware of potential hazards when on their journey.